Hi, so I've got 3 ideas for my final major project. I've got one that I'm confident in and I want to do, one that's more of a backup, and one that's sort of where my first one came from. It's like an old idea I'm not planning on using. My first idea is a short film about a man having an argument with himself. I want to use the studio to make a completely black environment with just a table and chairs in the center. And I want to try and get a spotlight aiming straight down on it from above. And I want a man to sit at it and kind of argue with himself and blame himself for his inner insecurities, his laziness, fear of failure, just inner demons. I plan to have it completely like dialogue heavy, which I think will be quite challenging because I've never written dialogue, I've never had to write a conversation. I want it to be between 2 and 3 minutes, because obviously it's full dialogue, I can't have it too long. I've already got an actor in mind for it who's male, so I'm thinking the target audience be primarily male, but I think the narrative could be relatable to either gender. I don't think it's something that's limited. Probably between 16 and 21, sort of young adult age, I relate to it most. I want to have quite dark, dim colouring, but I don't want it to be black and white. But I plan to take some test shots when I'm experimenting with lighting in the studio. So I'm also going to try some different colour correction techniques in After Effects on that. I plan to have the same character in the same shot twice by using the masking techniques in After Effects. I used them quite a lot last year and I'm quite confident in using them. I think I could even get some moving shots sort of panning around the table and animate the mask to show him twice in movement. To make it a little bit more visually interesting, I was thinking maybe you could have the table like a dinner table, like maybe have them doing something while they're speaking, so it's a little bit more interesting to watch and it's not just a black room and a table. Aside from the dialogue, I want some sort of dark ambient music, but because it's a dark, silent room, I don't think there'll be too much Foley sound, and I don't want it to be just dialogue and empty silence. So that's my first idea. My second idea is a documentary about video games' relationship with violence and the argument that they cause violence, especially in young people. I want to look at both sides of the argument and try to remain completely unbiased. I know quite a lot of people that are interested in video games, have strong opinions, so I could interview them, and I think maybe I could try and get interviews with game retailers, maybe some low-level developers and stuff like that. The target audience would be anyone with an interest in video games or the controversy around it, but most likely 16 plus because of the subject matter. I'd have quite a lot of locations for filming because I'd have to go to different interviewees, most likely, especially if it was like a developer or a retailer. I'd try and use a capture card to capture gameplay for sort of filler shots myself, because I've got the consoles to do it and I could get a capture card from a friend of mine. I'd do a lot of research into how the media present video games and the controversy and into the various arguments against it. And I'd be able to use interview footage completely naturally lit. I don't want any heavy special effects on it, just basic colour correction to make it look nice. I'd have it no more than 5 minutes long. I don't want it to go on for too long, and I don't think I'd be able to cover much more than that. It's only a backup idea, as I think the short film would be a little bit more interesting, and I think it'd be a lot more challenging, especially with the filming and the dialogue writing. The third idea is another short film, and it's kind of where my first idea came from. It uses the same setting with the completely black room, and it's supposed to be a sort of purgatory where a man sits alone and he sort of reads through a book about how he died. It's almost like a short story himself, and he'll read over it and monologue it and comment on it as he realizes it's about him and him committing suicide. And I'm thinking maybe there'll be some flashbacks in there. I might use GIFs, the same way we learned it in Surrealism. I'd use one actor between 16 and 19 male purely because that's the best actor I know and I think he'd be able to pull off the role best. The target audience would be 16 to 21 with no gender specification, as I think they'd be able to relate to the character best and to the subject itself. Aside from the commentary and the monologue of the character over the story, I'd want to get some audio in for the flashbacks kind of separately, kind of a distorted sound. I'm not entirely sure on that yet though. And the locations would be sort of split between the studio kind of purgatory world and the various locations the flashbacks would take place in. Has anyone got any questions?
I don't remember if you mentioned locations. Did you mention locations where you will film, your main idea?
For my main idea, it'd be in the studio. Because that's the only place we could make a completely dark environment. Has anyone else got any questions?
Do you know for the game first one, is it wearing like all black clothing?
I was thinking the two versions of him would have different clothing and kind of different hairstyles. I'm thinking maybe the version of himself he's blaming would look kind of, dark, menacing, and the version of him would look a little bit defeated, depressed, maybe a lot of blue. I'm not sure yet though. I'd have to look at what clothes I can get for my actor. Yeah.
If through experimentation you realise that the studio setting isn't going to work, what are your thoughts? What kind of settings?
This is from my main idea. If the studio setting didn't work, I did have another idea. It was the same, but instead of it being set in a studio, I could maybe have the other version of him be like a voice in his head, and it kind of taunts him and he goes about his day-to-day life, and I'd use a lot of different locations.
What's it going to look like? What are you going to change anything? I want to know what it looks like. What's it going to look like? You're going to take
In the studio?
Yeah.
How do you mean? Like how I'm going to have the set?
How is it going to feel? Because
Alright. I want it to be sort of a representation of inside his head, and because he's quite defeated, depressed, I want it to be quite dark, quite cold feeling.
okay. And also I'm interested why when the character's sort of arguing with himself about his failures and things like that, why have you chosen such a young character?
I think it's all about self-confidence or lack of it, and I think that's something that is very prominent in young people, like young adults, because obviously you've grown up and you've kind of, after you leave school, unless you really know what you're going to do, you're very unconfident, you're not sure. I know that's something I went through, like I wasn't sure at all what I wanted to do myself, and it's quite, anxiety in that is quite common in that age group. I also have actors that are fitting for it that I'm confident in. I'm confident they could pull it off.
Is the character based on you then?
Not so much based on me, but sort of struggles anyone this age group could go through. There might be a little bit of self-reflection in there. Not entirely. Just a little bit. Has anyone else got any questions?
Don't you think an older character would be better suited to the part?
Sorry?
Don't you think an older character would be better suited?
Possibly, but there is the issue of actor availability and whether I could find an older actor.
So, are you limiting yourself because of what's easier to achieve?
Not necessarily. I could look for older actors, certainly, but if I couldn't find them, it's good to be able to use a slightly younger actor.
I think myself and Dave both agree in that it'd be more challenging and more powerful to use a character that's older, not only because they've been through more challenges and failures and successes and things within the life, but also because actually it's quite interesting to see how that older character can relate to that younger audience, because I think you'd find that a lot of things you're describing actually are relevant
Yeah.
so you're not limiting yourself as much with your target audience also, and it'd be interesting to challenge
Yeah.
yourself to understand that side of it as well.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I'll probably have to look for older actors and see if that's something I could do.
Another thing you could,
Yeah.
just an idea. You don't have to go far with it, but what if you got like, what if you did both? So what if you did like an older act, no younger actor, but the older version of the actor?
What if he talks to his younger self?
Yeah.
Ah, right. That's interesting. Like he's, instead of using the still two versions of him, but they're not exactly the same. Like one's kind of like looking into the future.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's something I could definitely do if I found actors for it.
Some sort of similarity between the actors, though.
Yeah, they have to look somewhat similar. Yeah.
You can get Dave and me.
The college does have the higher education part of the college. You've got the Arden, the Arden School of Theatre, whatever they call it, and there are older actors in that, and we've used them in that.
All right, so I could go through that to find other actors. That'd be good. Yeah, that's something I'll have to think about then, actors. Has anyone else got any questions?
In terms of like equipment and technical stuff, in terms of like cameras and focus.
What equipment I'm going to use? I've got a camera myself that I can bring in, a DSLR. And as for lighting, I'm going to use the 3-point lighting. But I also spoke to Jason, who said he could possibly get the spotlight thing going on by mounting one light on the wall, on the ceiling, sorry. So that's what I'm going to experiment with in my test shots to see if it's doable or not. And if it's not, I'll have to make some changes.
What kind of shots are you going to use?
I want to use quite a range. I want quite a lot of close-ups, quite a lot of medium shots, long shots, because I want to use the full studio. And if I was to use the masking technique where it is the same guy, I'd want to have some sort of panning shot around the table, because I think, obviously, I'd have to merge two shots where he's in either seat, and I think it'd be quite challenging to animate the mask so that it looks as if there's two people sat at the table as it moves. So I want to experiment with stuff like that.
How are you going to get that shot? Are you going to use the ray or the dolly?
Yeah, I'd use a dolly.
Yeah, that'd be such a good shot.
I think it'd be hard, but I'd definitely try it.